Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to the seventh day, the penultimate day of Passover, as we celebrate Shabbat as well as Pesach. And we are reading from the book of Shemot for a special reading for the seventh day of Passover today. We turn to Bisselle, and in the 13th chapter, God tells the Israelite nation they've just escaped from Egypt, they've just escaped from the clutches of Pharaoh, they find themselves at the lip of the sea, and God tells them, Nichu tachanu alayam, I want you to camp by the sea. Which isn't that unusual. God just tells them to put down their tents and rest there. What is unusual is that Ishbitzer Rebbe makes a very fascinating, insightful comment on that phrase. He says there are some times when we find ourselves in places that do not belong to us. What's he referring to in the Parsha? He's referring to the fact that the Israelites are encamping by the sea on Egyptian territory, instead of having passed through the sea already, going the other side into their own land, the land that we now know as Israel. So he says, sometimes we find ourselves in places that do not belong to us, but when we find ourselves in those uncomfortable positions, we need to make sure that we do not forget who we are and what our call is in the world. Perhaps the phraseology reverberates more strongly during the holiday of Passover than any other time, when we literally separate from the world. We eat our own food, we don't go to restaurants, we eat matzah, we eat foods that are deliberately designed for the Passover holiday, and we are outside of the universe. And we feel ourselves as outsiders during the course of this week of Passover because we're eating deliberately separate from everybody else to celebrate our freedom, to remember the escape from Egypt, and to remember God's glory in redeeming us from Pharaoh, and who has redeemed us throughout the ages. Why do I say that? Because you're here, and I'm here. We've survived through the ages only because of God's goodness. But the point of the Ishbitzer Rebbe is that continually we find ourselves in places that are not of our own choosing. People may behave in a way that is not moral. They certainly behave in a way that is not Jewish because the majority of the world isn't Jewish. And in each one of those instances, it's our responsibility to remember who we are and where we come from. For if we forget, we'll truly be lost in the wilderness and we'll never be able to find our way out. So in the midst of a world that is largely secular or Christian, certainly not Jewish, not in America, not in most of the world too, except in Israel. It's important to remember what our mandate is, and that our responsibility as Jews is to fulfill God's word, to do the mitzvot, to fulfill our part of the bargain, our part of the covenant, as it were. So perhaps this is the hidden message behind camp by the waters of the sea in Egypt, says the Ishbitzer, because forever we are still in a foreign land, and it is still vital that we remember who we are, where we came from, and when that happens, we'll never forget where we're going, what our destiny is. Shabbat Shalom.